Looking around, I finally see I think I need a change. The rat race, I wanna flee, my world I'll rearrange. I'm getting back to the roots of how it's meant to be. Growing gardens, picking fruit, racing livestock, living free. It's a modern homestead. Build a modern homestead.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. We are your hosts, Harold Thornborough
and Rachel Jamison.
I'm glad you're joining us today. What's going on, Rachel? How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. We are Mother Nature up here has been a little bit crazy. Last week, I think when we talked, we had the crazy snowstorm and we had tons of snow, and now all the snow is gone and it's been like 40 degrees.
Yeah, it's been 50s. I think yesterday it was mid 50s and pretty nice day out. And I got up this morning and it was 48 when I woke up. So, I mean, it's changed. But then it's supposed to, this weekend, I think get down in the low 30s again. So, it's starting to go back the other way now. All over the place.
It is. It's a little bit crazy. So what's going on your homestead?
Oh, geez, same. Just, I've been sick. I actually had a few days of sick. We, gathered for Christmas and around all the kids and, everybody started passing their crud around. So I had a few days there where I wasn't feeling too good, but I also just been taking advantage of the slowdown, and been doing lots of reading and planning for this year on the homestead. And I've been thinking a lot about my aquaponics system that I talked about last week that completely failed with the really cold weather we had. But I took note of what didn't fail. And what didn't fail was the cuttings, the elderberry cuttings. Okay. They're doing great. It didn't affect them at all. And I thought, I think what I'm going to do rather than just shut this down is I have a bunch of cuttings. Elderberry cuttings and some goji berry cuttings that I was going to try to sell locally, and some other stuff. I was going to just try to take cuttings off a bunch of stuff. And I thought, I think I'm just going to, the aquaponics system just seems to be the ideal setup for rooting those things. And I'm just plugging them in there and letting them root. And I'm just going to I think I'm just going to just do that through the winter, just get everything rooted and ready to plant with some nice healthy roots on it come spring. And then I can put some in pots and sell and locally here. And I mean, I know that rooted cuttings do a lot better than just trying to stick them in the ground and root them. If they're already got some nice healthy roots on them and then planting them, they do a lot better. They grow a lot faster. So I think I'm going to try to do that. So I've just been, a lot of that, a lot of planning and a lot of, just focusing on what I got here and what's working and what ain't working and, going with it.
About the same thing over on this end. Just been going through some stuff and purging it and organizing it and end of year taxes and all that.
Oh yeah, I gotta play that
the
game.
Reality of life, though. So
yeah. Oh,
I've been doing that because my work slows down a lot for the next few months. So
yeah,
I've been doing that.
Been spending some time at the new property.
Yeah, we went for a hike and we were just it's easy to see things now because we have a lot of underbrush, like blackberries and stuff. So in the summer, it's hard to tell exactly where hills are. Our property's pretty hilly and it's hard to tell where things are. But once all those leaves and stuff are gone, it's like, oh, I didn't realize that. I mean, we actually found, this is an interesting story people would probably enjoy. So we bought this property within like 10 minutes of standing on it. It was like we bought it and we were standing in the middle of it and we were like, we love it, let's put an offer in. And I was literally standing on my phone on the property and told our realtor to start making the paperwork up, we're going to put an offer in. Well, that was in 2020, the summer of 2020. It was not until the spring of 2021 that we were walking around and we realized that there was a barn on the property. That's how much growth there was. Now, it's not the actual building is no longer standing.
Yeah.
But there was a foundation and a silo foundation.
And couldn't even see the silo
because of all of the blackberries and the raspberry. I mean, it was just, it's pretty
Really grown
overgrown.
up. Yeah.
So we could see that. So anyways, we were walking around making some plans, trying to decide what our focus is going to be. And my temporary fencing that I had put up, which I knew at the time was temporary, around the orchard has fallen down, and I have had some deer pressure on one of my apple trees. So that definitely is going to be priority this spring, is putting in a real fence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, have you just, okay. I mean, have you considered just taking pieces of fence and just circling those trees and just protecting the trees individually, or?
That's might be what I do this weekend.
Yeah, that might be easier and less expensive. And
yeah. But as they grow, they're going to need more than that.
Yeah, just get some 2x4 fence wire, fencing there, and just kind of make a loop that's in a fence post to hold it down, to keep it from rocking around or anything. And yeah,
that's what we're going to have to do temporarily. But as they grow, we won't be able to do that. So it's like, well, time to save my pennies for, that's my big expenditure, I think, this spring.
Yeah, fencing
money.
It gets a little, it can get expensive for sure.
Yes, it can. So that was my weekend. It was a nice little walk. It was pretty muddy since we had probably about 24 to 30 inches of snow, and it all melted.
Oh, so really?
It was quite it was pretty moist walk and muddy in some of the spots. So yeah.
No kidding. Yeah. Well, sounds like you've been staying somewhat busy then. The tax stuff will keep you busy if nothing else.
Yeah, well, that's pretty boring stuff.
It's a blessing to work on that new homestead, though, and start making some things happen out there. I mean, that's got to be exciting every time you guys go out there and start making plans and taking on little tasks. And
I'm trying to decide which direction to go with the garden we have here and how much, we want to do here and move out there. And it's just we're really kind of at a, what do you call it? I don't know, crossroads. We're not sure what to do. And because we don't know the timeline. We have no idea the timeline. It could be 10 years from now. It could be next year. Who knows?
Well, I know you have talked about you'd love to get back into at least small livestock, if not large livestock at some point. And today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, kind of being a little more self-sufficient with the feed for especially small livestock. And we're going to talk about that in the form of actually growing insects for your livestock feed. Now, I think that's a great idea for a lot of livestock. It can save you a ton of money. It can actually provide for a healthier livestock. But what we're not going to talk about is unnatural diets, because there is this movement, of there's a movement on a couple levels. There's a movement of trying to force people to eat bugs, which we're dead against. I mean, if you want to eat bugs, you should be free to do that, and that's fine. I know there's a lot of people who say it's a good protein source, and they make use of the flowers and the things that are actually like an insect meal, and that's fine. You should be free to do that, of course. But there's also this movement to force people to eat insects, and that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about raising insects for you to consume. There's also this big movement for like feeding like large livestock, like cattle, ground up insect meal, and which is a completely unnatural diet for them. And we're not talking about that either, because I just don't feel like that's the good place to go with your cattle. I mean, these are animals that are meant to graze and eat grass, and that's why I'm not even for them living off grain like so many of them do. They're meant to graze, and but on the flip side of that, small livestock, like some of the animals we're going to talk about today, insects are a huge part of their diet. I mean, in a natural forage situation, they're going to eat every insect they can because they love it, and it's very healthy for them. And we as homesteaders can actually supplement that diet ourselves and raise the insects. I mean, so many people buy like mealworms and things and feed them to their chickens, but have you priced a bag of mealworms lately?
Not lately. When I had chickens, I had bought some for mine, but yeah.
I was at Rural King yesterday. A 5-pound bag of mealworms was like $30.
That's crazy.
And I was thinking, wow, that's a lot of money, because that ain't a real big bag of mealworms.
Well,
Not
and I'm gonna
really.
guess they're not selling a lot of them at that price, but maybe I'm wrong.
People love their chickens. You got these chicken people who it's their pet, and I mean, there's people that love their dog so much they buy over $100 bag of dog food,
True, true.
so I mean, there's people feel that way about their chickens and they'll go buy stuff like that. But so what we're basically some of the animals that can eat.
Yeah. So you're not talking about chocolate covered crickets or anything?
I'm not a bit interested in those, but you can snack on those while we podcast. I don't mind. But if one of them scratchy little legs get caught in your throat, I hope somebody's close. They can come in there and help you out. And I'm not, like I said, people all over the world, there are insects consumed by people. And it's in some parts of the world, it's actually a major part of their diet. And that's cool. It's fine. But there does seem to be this movement. You hear a lot about it where it's like they're really pushing because of the low impact, on the environment and these things. And it's like, man, I just don't buy into all that personally. And you teach their own. You want to go down that route, you go. But I'm not for people forcing me to do anything, especially eat insects. So I'm sure there's some health benefits to it, and I'm not opposed to anybody doing it. But as long as I can buy some hamburger or some chicken, I'm eating that.
I think I would rather eat my crickets through my chicken eggs or my chicken wings.
Yeah, I'll let them process them into something, and then I'll eat them. Yeah, exactly. But some of the animals that can eat insects, that is a major part of their diet, and you can grow insects for them. Chickens, of course, we've already mentioned that a few times. Chickens, there is no such thing as a vegetarian chicken. And anybody that would try to tell you that is crazy, because I guarantee you, if a moth flies in front of that chicken, it's going to attack it. Anything, a fly, anything goes in front of them, they're going to attack it. If they see a mouse, they're going to tear into it. I mean, they're going to eat meat. And they love insects. They love them. And it's a major part of their diet. When you got free range chickens, I guarantee you they're eating every insect they see, and they can see pretty good.
Yeah. And I mean, I know people on our list, we have ducks. I mean, I know people that got ducks just solely for the purpose of eating slugs out of their garden.
Yep. Slugs, snails, things like that. Yeah. They'll tear into them, and they love them, but they'll eat other things too. They'll eat worms, and they'll eat, all kinds of stuff. We can talk about that. I mean, ducks have a more diverse diet than you think. I mean, they will actually eat a lot of different bugs. I mean, you don't think with their bill, the way their beak is, or bill is, that they would. But they do. They eat a lot of those things. They really like insects. Turkeys, of course, is another large bird. It will tear into any insect it can find. My quail love insects. They will chase them around. I mean, I get them in the tractor and I'll see some bug flying around in there, and they look like a herd of dinosaurs running after something. I mean, they just all shoot to the other end of the tractor chasing a bug. It's hilarious. But yeah, they love it. Pheasant, of course. I mean, you're in the same vein of a game bird, like turkeys and quail. They love it. But then there's, fish is a livestock for a lot of people, and I think about it from aquaponics, and you can actually go pretty large scale on that and make fish a major part of your farming. You can farm catfish, bluegill, and all these predator fish that love insects. There's all kinds of things, grasshoppers, crickets, which we'll talk all about all these things, worms, of course, fish
what do you go to the
love.
store to buy when you go to go fishing?
Yeah. You're buying insects
there's people that make flies just for fly fishing, which emulate flies.
Yeah, exactly. And just all the different worms. And I mean, I've bought crickets and to go fishing, and I've bought all these things, so yeah, fish are a big part. Now, these are all the smaller livestock, of course. Now there is, you actually in the show notes, you included a link to a study about pigs eating insects that you can feed pigs. And absolutely, it's not small livestock necessarily. It can be, I guess, if you're dealing with like potbellies or coons or something, but they can eat it, and it is natural in their diet. When they're rooting through the ground, they come across a grub or something, or an earthworm, they're going to eat it. They don't discriminate. They'll tear into it. But I don't know about how much of their diet you want to actually produce insects to feed them and like fill up a bowl for them to eat it or whatever. I think that can get questionable with pigs. I mean, how much of that you're feeding them, but
Yeah.
I mean, it won't hurt them necessarily for a certain amount, but there'll probably be a level there where it starts crossing the line
Yeah,
with
probably
a pig.
like as a supplement to their diet. I mean,
Yeah,
pigs
yeah.
eat a lot like we do. I mean, unlike a lot of birds where they'll eat a lot
Right.
of grains and stuff, pigs are a lot, they're omnivores.
Yeah,
So
they have a very diverse
guess
diet.
that
Yeah.
a varying diet. So you could feed them some.
But so does a chicken. I mean, they're eating vegetation
Yeah.
and stuff too, and they're eating
Yep.
the bugs. I mean, I don't know that with anything. I mean, diversity is important. And I just don't think with any of these animals, you'd want to just say raise mealworms and feed them 100% of a mealworm diet or anything. I that's a bad idea. I think just having a varied diet of all kinds of vegetation and insects and whatever, just different plants and all kinds of things is a good idea. When you can do that. So, yeah, I mean, food scraps can be a big part of that. Just all kinds of vegetation. So
leftover milk, all that kind of stuff.
yeah. You want some diversity there. So, but it's an interesting thing to think about when it comes to feeding something like pigs. When you get into your ruminants, no, I don't think it's a good idea. And I think there's talk about it. There's talk about, like I said, grinding up these insects and making the insect meal and feeding it to, goats, sheep, cattle. And I'm thinking that's just a bad idea, I think, in my opinion. But
yeah, I think you're just replacing one ideology for another one. Those are ruminants that are supposed to be eating vegetation.
They're created to do a certain thing, and you're taking them out of their natural way. How's Joel Salton put it? The cowness of a cow, or the the whatever pigness of a pig, and you're removing that from a cow if you start to feed them in a natural diet. They're not getting to be the cow they're meant to be. So yeah, I think it's just a bad idea. But so that's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about, I just think it's important that we start looking at these ways that we can feed our livestock in a more self-sufficient manner, because feed prices are going way up. I mean, I just mentioned how much a bag of mealworms is, and that's crazy, But even just when you're buying the feed for them, it's going way up in price, and it's getting harder to find sometimes in some places. And
if you want organic or non-GMO, that's like even more expensive. And the cool thing about these, I mean, outside of the pigs mentioned, all of these animals, I mean, turkeys might be questionable, but all of these animals you can have on a fairly small homestead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So. And
this is a food that you can create in pretty good volumes on a pretty small homestead. They're just, I mean, a lot of times it's, we'll talk a little bit about the kind of the processes. I'm not going into a lot of detail on the processes of some of these insects we're going to talk about today, but I mean, most of them are done in like totes and things, and you can get pretty large numbers of them in a pretty small space. So, I mean, you can actually generate a lot of food for your animals in small spaces. So, yeah. And I think I mentioned it a couple times, so we'll jump right into this first one that we're going to talk about, and that's mealworms. Mealworms, pretty much everybody that has chickens has bought a bag of mealworms at some point and fed them to their birds, and they love them. It's candy to them. They go crazy for those dried mealworms that you get at the feed store. You said your husband, actually,
as a kid,
raised them. Yeah.
My husband was raised on like a little, I guess you would call it a hobby farm. I don't know. They did it to save money though, so I don't know if it was really a hobby. But they had sheeps and goats and birds, and they used to raise their own mealworms for
like in large volume, or how they
in a pretty large volume, because they also raised caged birds like songbirds.
Yeah,
they raised those to sell, and so they would feed them to those birds, but they would also feed them to their chickens and turkeys and stuff. So they had them in a fairly large volume.
Yeah. Well, if people don't know what a mealworm is, it's actually the larva of a darkling beetle. So you're starting with the beetles, of course, to get started into it. And one of the benefits with any larva, really, I mean, you're going to see this in a minute with a couple of the others too, but it's really high protein. They have a really high protein, like around 50% or over in some cases of protein So it's really good for energy, in the wintertime, especially birds, they need a lot more protein in the wintertime. It really helps them. Your game birds like quail and turkey and pheasant, they're high protein birds. They really need that high protein. So it's a great feed for them on those high protein levels. So they're great for that. I did link up because it's going to be really hard to describe the process of really doing this. I actually seen a person one time in a video, and they had like one of these there's plastic it's almost like a plastic dresser, like for
that's how we
okay, yeah, and it has the drawers that you'd pull out, and they had them on the different levels. They would have like the stuff in there. They'd have like they would move the drawers down as they would progress, and then start new batches at the top, and they would do it like that. Or I've seen people just do them in totes, and they'll make like a lid or whatever, a screen lid or whatever, and put them in there. Some different ways. I linked to a blog post on some pretty good detail and a video also on how to start a mealworm farm. How to do it. And there's a few ways to do it. And there's people who do it every day that are really, really good at it. So I just kind of refer you to them, but it's not hard. There are a lot of people who do it, and I've watched a lot of videos on it, and it's not hard. It's really, it just happens, and now where do you start at? Well, you can purchase the beetles. I found some sellers on Etsy. I found some on Amazon. I put links in the show notes. You can go check those out. They're not even that expensive, really. I mean, you're starting off with a batch of like 25 beetles or something. I mean, they're not a big batch, but, so you're probably gonna have to expand beyond that. But, it's a few dollars, but I think it's a worthwhile venture to go to get started in, because a 5-pound bag of mealworms is $30. I mean, let's just think about that for a minute. That's crazy. And if you can spend less than that to get your beetles, and you're throwing some scrap feed in there for them, and it just doesn't cost a lot once you get started raising them to keep them going. I mean, it's really almost nothing.
If you combine it with everything else that we've talked about possibly doing, it becomes this well-rounded feed that you can save money on and have birds.
I mean, just for an example, I mean, chickens, let's just narrow it down to chickens, or even quail, but let's just say chickens, because that's what most people, it's the starter bird for most people. I mean, so you're foraging, the dandelions and the plantain and the comfrey and all the things that are in your yard. You're throwing them the scrap tops of all the vegetables that you're chopping up and canning, and you're throwing those to them. You got some food scraps you're tossing to them. You're raising mealworms and a few of these other things we're going to talk about today. You know what? You could probably come real close to providing 100% of the feed for your birds.
Yeah.
With not a lot of effort. That's quite an accomplishment. You're talking about free eggs and free meat when you do that.
Right. And I mean, and you and I, before we started the podcast, we're talking about the price of eggs right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's the price and the availability of eggs. And
do you give up time? Yes.
Yeah. There's a little bit of time involved in it.
Yeah.
But there's a trade-off there, of course. But I mean, when you consider what things are costing, how much is your time worth, and the cost? And I mean, a lot of us get into homesteading because we're willing to trade our time for, healthier food and this sense of self-sufficiency and independence from our food system. And you know what? This is healthy food for your birds, your animals.
Yes, it is.
I mean, you're going to get a higher quality egg. You're going to get a higher quality meat, because you know what you're giving them, and it's pure food. I mean, it's the stuff that they eat in nature. I mean, it's something they're meant to digest, and they're going to produce a good product for you when you feed them. Like I said, it's not 100% of your diet, but I mean, it can definitely be a pretty large percentage. I would say 10 to 20% easy in this of this kind of food. And yeah, I mean, it's just very good. So if it's something you're interested in, check out that blog post I linked to. Check out the video. You'll find all kinds of videos and blog posts out there on them. I picked what I thought were a couple of good ones that made it look simple, and you can get started there. But yeah, I think it's definitely something worth doing. And it's something, quite honestly, mealworms are probably something I'm going to.
I'm actually thinking, even if you don't have chickens right now, which we're probably going to maybe be getting them again. But yeah, we're going to talk about later other things that you can do with some of these.
I say this, but I actually did it once. I did it for about a month. I did one round of them.
Did you
like
really?
6 years ago. Yeah. It wasn't hard, but again, time. And I was busy at the time. I was working 70 plus hours a week at my
You
job.
were working more than you are
And
now.
it was hard it was just one more thing on my list. So I gave them up, and it was pretty easy. And I did actually do it. Well, why I mentioned the drawer thing is because that's what I did it in. And
so when I was looking into
easy.
doing it,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to do, was the drawer method.
But most of the actual videos I found were doing it in a tote. And they made it look really easy also. So yeah.
Yep.
The next thing we'll talk about is a black soldier fly larva. And I was pretty turned off about this at one point because I had seen some people doing it. But while doing some research for this episode, I see alternative ways to do it that isn't as nasty as what I saw before. A lot of the people were doing it before
for the same reason.
Because they were taking meat.
Yes.
And hanging it and letting the larva like crawl out of they had this little setup, and it was basically rotting carcasses is what they were using.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if that's what it takes, I don't want to go near my, animals and have to smell that, and
for me, it was, I also didn't want to attract predators.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you're going to get possums and raccoons and all kinds of stuff coming in for that. Yeah. And I was just like, I'm not interested. I mean, it looked neat. It looked like a legitimate food source for them, but, and it was feeding, and it was kind of a natural food source too, that they weren't even having to do. They hung it and they put this little setup with a milk jug or whatever. And because the natural tendency of black soldier fly larvae is to climb up as they grow. And they would actually fall off right off the end and right down into the chicken coop the way they had this design. Well, I've seen these setups now after doing a little bit more study, doing it in totes. And they actually had a tote where they were, and they were using feed. They were using like cornmeal.
Interesting.
And they were, and I guess the thing is with, according to what I was reading, is that the black soldier fly actually don't lay the eggs in the food source, but near the food source. So they would have like sand, like these things of sand or whatever laying next to it. And they would actually lay the eggs there. They would climb over to the food source. They would eat. And then they would have these boards up out of the tote. They would basically crawl up the boards as they age, because that's their natural thing. What they do, they crawl up and then they fall over into another tote. Well, then they just take them out of that tote and feed them to their livestock. It looks so easy and simple. I was like,
I'm remembering this. Nick Ferguson, actually, I will have to find that video. He made a video on using bugs for growing bugs for your animals. And I think he had a couple of videos in his of that method as well.
Yeah, I did find you could what?
You can even grow the cornmeal.
Yeah, you could. And there were some different things. There was one of them was actually using feed, like leftover, like some feed that got wet, and put that in there. And I mean, I linked to some blog post and a video on this as well that you can go check out. And or just a blog post rather, I think, on this one. But there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of blog posts on using black soldier fly larvae and farming it basically for your animals. And like I said, just find a method that works for you. I was turned off of it a few years ago because I've seen some methods I didn't want to partake in, but these look simple. Now, black soldier flies are pretty common to most of the United States, but I guess they're more common in the southern states. So I don't even know if you have black soldier flies in Michigan.
I don't know if we do or not.
I don't know. And I guess it is harder to get them to naturally come in and lay their eggs in some parts of the country than in other parts of the country. But I did, and I actually came across I think it was a video. Yeah, it was a video I came across, and this guy couldn't do it, but he actually purchased the larva.
Okay.
And basically started doing it himself, from that. Yeah. And I did put the link. I did put a link in where you can purchase black soldier fly larva if you have to do that. If you can't get them to kind of come in naturally. I mean, obviously, if you can get them to come in naturally, that's way better. I mean, it's cheaper and it's going to be a simpler process for you. But I thought even that would be an option for some people, and you could just kind of get the production going, there.
One of the things I noticed when I was reading about black soldier flies is that they have a really high level of calcium. So if
Yeah, I
you're
read that
doing
too.
like
Yeah,
your
protein and calcium.
quail or the
Yeah, yeah,
chickens for,
their
you're
eggs.
constantly trying to give them enough
Yep,
for their eggs. And I mean,
absolutely.
that's just a great additional thing besides the protein is
Yep.
some of these bugs have a lot of minerals in them too that help your animals.
Yep, absolutely. So those are a couple good ones. Those are a couple common ones too. I mean, a lot of people talk about those two things, mealworms and black soldier flies, and literally everything on our list could eat both all that. I mean, everything, all the animals that we mentioned could probably eat all that to some percentage of it of their feed. Um, Now moving on to a little bit different kind of animal, we're going to talk about crickets.
I think crickets are one of the ones that we see the most that people are turning into flour for human use.
Yeah, we're not going to go
Um,
there.
but those I actually have heard of people growing crickets, and we actually considered
Oh,
growing crickets ourselves. One of the things that turned us off to growing crickets was we had heard about some of the smells, but apparently that's not actually the cricket, and that's more of a hygiene issue.
yeah, keeping things they're set up
Growing,
clean. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I
for
heard that. I
growing the
read that
crickets.
too.
But yeah, those seem like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever had chickens watching them chase crickets and grasshoppers. They love them.
And you know what? I used to buy crickets for fishing all the time. I mean, you used to have
Oh yeah,
the little cage, that you take fishing with you, and you buy a bunch of crickets and throw them in there from the bait shop and go fishing with crickets. So it's a great fish food as well. I mean, it's just, and so I mean, I would look at the bait shop, and then obviously somebody's farming these
yeah,
crickets, right? So I mean, it
exactly.
makes you think, where this
Yep.
coming from? Well, again, I linked to some videos on how to breed and raise crickets. It's pretty simple. Like you said, though, there are some issues with keeping things clean
Yeah,
because
you have to keep it clean.
evidently there is a smell issue if you don't. Like, I
Apparently,
don't
yeah.
know what the deal is exactly. It's dead crickets, and it's the feces and just all the things,
Right.
the food that they're eating and whatnot. But so there is some maintenance issues with raising crickets that are probably more serious than some other insects, as far as keeping things
That
clean.
also creates a cycle for you to use that in your compost because
Yep, absolutely.
that creates fertility. I mean,
Yep,
bugs poop just like animals poop, and
yep,
all of that creates fertility in your yard.
yeah.
So, yep.
I actually found this website called the Critter Depot, and the video I actually linked to is a video they did on basically doing it yourself, and they sell the crickets. You can also buy them on Amazon. I got a link in there as well for that if you want to go get them there. But they have a lot of information at that Critter Depot, and I was pretty impressed by. I mean, they sell the different size crickets, and you think, okay, well, what's the deal there? Well, there's certain once they get to a certain size is when they actually start laying eggs. So, but then you can buy them younger and get a lot more of them for the same price and just raise them up and
Right.
go on there. But you kind of order by the length, so it's like 1/4 inch where you're more baby ones. So there you get a lot more of them. But like once you get about 5/8 and up, that's when they start getting into the breeding age or laying egg,
Okay.
where they lay eggs. So I remember the guy in one of the videos says 5/8. If you're looking for something that's going to like start laying eggs right away, probably order like 5/8 inch crickets. But he was in the video, he's got 1/4 inch crickets, and he's got this, I don't know, hundreds of them. He's putting in this tote, and he shows you how to set the tote up and how to do everything. And it just looked really simple. And I was like, wow, he made that look really, really easy. And he came back and showed, the progression and things. And I thought, well, that don't look hard at all, And now I look at like crickets and grasshoppers that we're going to talk about here in a minute. And there's so many of those around here. I'm thinking, man, I could just go out and kind of harvest those things in nature. We got so many of them. I
Right.
mean, there's so many. But yeah, I mean, you can buy them and keep them, right there and just have this turnover where you're not actually having to go out and chase them down to get a bunch, but rather they're right there on your property,
Right.
and you just go get, a pail full of them or whatever and feed your animals. And again, I almost think it'd be cool to not just focus on any one of these, but maybe 2 or 3 of these options here. We're going to talk about
Seems like
a
it, yeah.
few, but if you could get 2 or 3 or 4 of these things going that
Right.
work for your time schedule and, the way you want to do it, man, again, diversity, you got different insects even are going to have different nutrient profiles that are going to get, just for different needs for your animals. So yeah, get 2 or 3 different ones going, but crickets seem like a very viable option for your livestock or for Rachel to eat in her cricket meal that she's
Chocolate covered.
chocolate covered crickets or whatever she wants to.
Sure. Sure.
Not me. It's a last resort for me. I'm not saying I'd never do it, but yeah, last resort.
Yeah.
What brings us to the next thing, which is similar to crickets, is grasshoppers and locusts. Now, surprisingly, I found when I think about eating insects, I mean, you read a Bible and you hear about it being a food source for people of the past. Of course, it's just locusts, right? And what you discover is that grasshoppers are called locusts in a lot of the world. So we think of it a little different here because we have the different locusts. But when I'm saying grasshoppers and locusts, I think when I did find a few videos and blog posts about it, they were actually talking about grasshoppers when they referred to locusts.
Okay.
So evidently it's just referred to as locusts in a lot of the world. But it was actually surprisingly hard to find a lot of information about people raising those for feed. But what you do find is really on all of these is not so much for like livestock, but for like reptiles, people who are raising reptiles like bearded dragons and things like that, and whatever. They're raising them on a smaller scale just to have some of those to feed their reptiles and things. So you see a lot of that, even on some fish and things like that. So any of you do find they're really on a really small scale. But in my mind, though, I was thinking it looked pretty easy to scale up. I mean, just more bins or whatever, to do it in a larger scale. But actually grasshoppers and locusts looked easier than crickets.
Really? I think
literally
have the bad rap because when you have grasshopper and locust issues, they will
an infestation. Like if they got out, they could do, if you got
they
like a bunch
have a bad
of them.
Rap, and that's why you don't see as much information, I suppose.
Yeah. The people I seen doing it they were like in aquariums, raising them with like a screen top.
Okay.
I guess it could keep, and they were all indoors, like in a basement or something like that. They had a setup, but they were doing it for their reptiles. Everyone I saw, I don't know, you could easily transfer that into a more homestead style setup, something that would work for your homestead. But yeah, another very viable option, absolutely edible. If you've ever seen a chicken chasing a grasshopper, it's pretty entertaining. Yeah. I mean, they will go after them and they'll take off flying and the birds will full blast run after them. And then, the grasshopper will land and the chicken will do a 180 and spin around sideways and go forward. I mean, it's just hilarious to watch them chase them. It's just entertaining. It's pure entertainment.
It's very entertaining.
But they're again, I posted a video on how to make a bin for breeding grasshoppers. But I think I'm going to have to maybe do it just to get a design down and just so I can actually write a blog post on it. It seemed like there's not a lot of information out there on it. And I'm actually curious now as a better setup for a homestead style, production. So I might do it this spring just to kind of
pretty big and meaty too.
Yeah, they're large. I mean, so you're going to get a lot of food for a pretty small number of grasshoppers for your livestock. And I thought, well, that seems like even a better option than crickets in my mind. It looked like they were actually easier.
Wonder if they have the smell issue too.
They didn't talk about it in the videos. One guy had a wall full of aquariums full of them. And he had hundreds of them. And I don't know, it wasn't mentioned, but but every article I read on the crickets mentioned it. So it must be a real issue with the crickets. But yeah, there's those kinds of insects. That takes us to one that everybody knows about, but maybe you didn't think about raising them for your livestock, and that's earthworms. We talk a lot about vermicomposting and using like composting worms. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. You could do it with your vermicomposting worms, but I feel like they have more value as a composting worm, like your red worms and things. But if you have an abundance of them, absolutely, you can toss a handful of them to your livestock. They will love them. They will eat them up.
I feel like it's just a great place to start because earthworms are so great for your garden anyways.
Yeah.
So it's like that multi-purpose bin that you could use.
And honestly, I mean, you look at people who do farm them that sell them for bait and things, and it's a simple setup. I always see the bedding that they use with like newspaper and and whatever, they have those full. And so, I mean, it doesn't look difficult. I linked to a video and some information about farming earthworms and their nutrition profile. Very nutritious. I was surprised. I was looking at that nutrition profile and I was surprised at the nutrition, all the diversity of nutrients and whatnot and calories and all that. It's kind of amazing. I was surprised that earthworms had that kind of nutrition. Very nutritious. So
I've seen my chickens would fight over them. And it was, if you've ever had chickens in a garden together, the chickens would see me grab the shovel and they would be right on me.
Yeah,
they knew if I had the shovel out, they were going to find a worm.
You're going to turn that dirt over and they're going to go crazy. Yeah. Or if you're doing it with compost, like I've seen them in compost and you like stick it in the compost, flip that compost over and they just start tearing into it and grabbing everything.
Man. And they will fight over them. Mm-hmm. They love them. Yep.
But yeah, there's not a lot of people are doing composting worms, but not a lot of people are doing earthworms. I guess, I've always, like when we go ready to go fishing, I mean, here was the thing all growing up. This is what my dad did. Like if it was, either a rainy day or we go out with a water hose and spray the lawn down right at dark, right before dark. Soon as that sun drops, grab your flashlight, go out there, and we'd fill a bucket full of them, for fishing because we were going to go fishing the next day. You could do that, or you can purchase them. I mean, they're out there for sale. You can buy some and start them. I honestly, I would just go get them out of my yard and then get them focused into a bed that I've made for them. You could probably use an old bathtub or build you a bed for them, or it just use totes, whatever. I did link to a video of a guy doing the Canadian night crawlers, and he just used totes and he showed you how to layer the stuff for them and get them set up, and super easy. He was doing it so he'd have bait for fishing. But absolutely you could do it on a larger scale for feed for your animals.
Yeah, you could.
And like I said, after reading that article that I read on the nutrition profile of them, it's definitely a worthwhile insect to think about for feeding your livestock. One I hadn't thought much about because I didn't know how valuable it was as a feed was silkworms.
I have never heard of that.
But I found a lot of articles on it actually of people feeding them, using them for again, it's pretty common for reptiles, but I did find some articles even feeding them for like chickens and things. Silkworms is really big in the reptile realm, I guess, for feeding them. I guess it's a high quality feed for them because they have a lot of the nutrition that they need. There are some potential allergy issues because they produce silk. I guess there's some people there's some potential allergy issues for some people. So be aware of that if you're going to go into the silkworms.
I didn't know that.
But what do silkworms love to eat? Or what is their number one crop for feeding? Mulberry leaves. Well, we're big on mulberry leaves around here. Yeah. So if it's something you already have on your homestead, you're producing the feed to feed the silkworms, to grow the silkworms to feed your chickens or whatever.
That's pretty wild.
You could completely produce this on your property. And you're thinking, well, how do I get started with silkworms? And well, you can buy them. You can buy the starts to get going with silkworms, and you'll find them on Etsy, Amazon, and some places that sell them, and get started absolutely with some silkworms on your property. I looked at that and I went, okay, I didn't know that. Maybe that's something I really need to pursue because I have an abundance of mulberry leaves, every year. Maybe this is something I really need to look into. Now, the video I linked to, they didn't use leaves. They wasn't using mulberry leaves. They actually was buying this feed for silkworms. But then I actually seen this comparison video on this feed that they were talking about versus mulberry leaves. And so their natural food is mulberry leaves. But I guess they make some feed mixes for silkworms that you can feed them. So anyway, you can go down that rabbit hole if you want and see where that takes you. But again, it's something that I have to think about because it's something that we have the feed for here on this homestead.
So I'm seeing your next one and I'm thinking to myself, so the video that I'll place it in the show notes for people to watch later, but Nicholas Ferguson actually raises these and I interviewed him a while back, but cockroaches.
Yeah, that's a big no for me.
Me too.
I'm
No
not
way.
bringing cockroaches onto my property.
No way.
If one shows up, I'm going to annihilate it as fast as I can. I want nothing to do with cockroaches on my property,
Flamethrower. Yep.
but it's out there. It's a thing. People are feeding them to their livestock and they're farming them.
And that's a
And
big bug.
it's also big in the reptile industry. So I guess it's a favorite bug for reptiles. So that's why a lot of people are doing it. I want personally nothing to do with it. But if you're interested in farming cockroaches, I'm including a video in the show notes that makes it look
I know.
as something realistic. I mean, they're doing it in a tote that's covered.
Yeah.
That's I mean, they're producing hundreds of them.
Yeah.
The idea
Nick
of
said he
hundreds
has
of
his in a
cockroaches.
closet, in his bedroom closet.
Yeah,
And
it's
just like,
it's a game I'm not going to play. You're not going to play. You want to do it, have at it. I mean, again, it is a viable feed source for your animals. It is. Has
Tight lid
nutrition
required.
levels.
Tight lid required.
Yeah, very tight lid.
One of those clamped down lids, man. There's no way. No.
Maybe if I have like 100 acres and I have to drive to the other end of my property to where I keep the cockroach bin to feed my chickens that are in that area, maybe, but not on this little urban homestead. It ain't going to happen.
I have been in hotels and stuff with them. No.
Oh man, I'm just yeah, it's not something, but I just wanted to put it out there because in the world, it's a thing, it's a feed source. And I guess if all feed disappeared, I might be looking for any options for feeding my livestock. And in that case, I mean, in case of a nuclear holocaust, we've always heard cockroaches are going to be the thing that are surviving. So feed them to the chickens that survived and eat your radioactive chicken. I don't know, but
my guess is they're probably super easy to breed because we know how hard
I'm thinking
they are to
it takes nothing to get them to produce for you. But again, I included it because it's a thing. There's people out there doing it. And I'd have to be like you, pretty desperate to go down that path. But maybe Nick does it, and good for Nick. Good for Nick. I'm not going to do it.
And his wife is a saint because in the bedroom closet,
man. Oh yeah, I just it's not something I'm getting a little bit weird feeling just talking about it. I don't want to think about it, but it's a thing.
I think I would rather eat crickets than raise cockroaches.
I would eat everything on this list in abundance before I would eat one cockroach.
Right.
Oh yeah, there you have it. So anyway, we're going to move on to now we talked a lot about feeding your livestock. Yeah. But I feel like we also have to talk about this a little bit, this next thing, and that's these things as an income opportunity. Because as I'm doing this research, what I'm finding is there's an opportunity here. Because there's a lot of people who aren't going to do this, but they'll buy those mealworms. They'll buy those soldier fly larvae. They'll buy those crickets. They'll buy all this stuff. They'll buy it. And now your customer base is a few different things there. You can sell the insects for feed to people who don't want to mess with it. I mean, go down to the feed store, your Rural King or your TSC or whatever, and watch how many people spend $30 on a bag of mealworms.
Right.
These are your customers. You can sell them for $20 a bag and make a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? So there's an opportunity there. And it's not just homesteaders. I mean, there's people who have reptiles and rodents and fish, that eat these things. And so there's a customer base there that, it's again, I'm thinking when we think about things you could do to bring income on your homestead that you could raise, you can have an urban homestead and make a really healthy income raising things like this for people with way bigger homesteads than yours and sell it to them. It's a possible income source for you. You can also sell breeding stock for people who are wanting to get into this. Now, I was telling you, I was seeing Amazon link and Etsy links for people who are selling. These are just individuals who are selling a starter kit, basically, to get started with mealworms or to get started with black soldier flies or whatever. And, you could do that.
It's the equivalent of selling seedlings and cuttings.
Yeah. Or selling like,
Or baby pigs.
fertilized eggs or anything like that.
Yeah.
People who just want to get started. And there's a need for that. And some of those things I didn't find a lot of links for, like silkworms. It was hard to find, like some people who were selling those. I only found a couple, even on I did find more of the mealworm starts. Those were a little bit more available. Crickets were a little bit, I found some, but like I said, I had to dig a little bit. I didn't find any for grasshoppers. So I don't know if there's a thing there or not. I mean, I'm just saying there's some opportunities there. You can start doing the cockroaches, Rachel, and you can supply those for people.
I'm sure. And it's also a one way to never get people to come visit your house.
That's right. You don't like people. You want to keep them away. Yeah. Just start you a little cockroach farm. Oh, but the one we all know about is a bait shop. I mean, if you could do the worms and the crickets and these
pet
are
stores.
Fish baits. Yeah. Or supplying for pet stores.
Yeah.
So there's some different customer options there for doing these things. And I think it's something that especially folks on a smaller homestead who aren't selling, pork and chicken and, beef and things. This is an option where I think you could make a lot of money doing this. And
I'm kind of starting to consider, we're all looking for ways to be home more instead of at work.
Yeah. Hey, if I could sell 5 pounds of mealworms for even $20, I mean, wow. I mean, what now you do the math and see what it takes to produce that kind of, I don't know. I'm not real sure. I mean, I did it on a really small scale for like 1 month, one time. I don't know. It did pretty good. I mean, I had a few of them. Fed them to my quail, worked great. And then I just didn't continue on. I kind of let things go and I didn't push it, but I don't know what's it take to produce that kind of volume. I don't know. But I think looking at the price of things, it could be worth doing some homework on and say, do I have a place I could set this up and produce? This is a livestock feed that I can make on my property or whatever. Might be worth looking into. And there's some different ways. You mentioned this in the show notes and I forgot to really talk about it, but like with the mealworms and the black soldier fly larvae, people might ask, do I feed those live to my chickens, or you're buying the mealworms and they're dehydrated, they're dried,
they're dried or dehydrated. I think
you can freeze them. Now I was looking at some different ways of that. Like what people will do a lot of times is so you just don't have this abundance of live critters. You could make them, put them in a container and actually just throw them in the freezer and they'll die, they'll freeze. And then you can either bring them out, they're dead now, you could thaw them out and feed them to your chickens, or you could take that extra step and actually dehydrate them at that point. And they're whole and they're dehydrated, but you could do that and you could actually sell them that way. Or you can sell the live ones. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, honestly, dead ones would be easier to manage and you could have an abundance of them on, in as an inventory to sell. Of course, for breeding stock, you're going to have to maintain those live ones. But for people who are purchasing them for feed, chickens don't care. They'll go crazy for the dehydrated mealworms. They love them. Like I said, it's candy to them. They love it. So yeah, I think it's something on a small level that you could go down and just kind of start playing with. And there's opportunities for feed for your own homestead to be more closed loop and self-sufficient, but there's this opportunity to be a supplier for other homesteaders and meet their needs. And I think we're going to see a growing need for this as time goes on.
And I think and to be honest with you, I wonder if this isn't healthier for your animals than buying feed for them.
Yeah, I think it probably is. It's more natural for sure.
They're still going to get feed, but if you replaced part of their rations with this, I think you're going to end up with a healthier product.
I think so too. I think you're going to get a better product.
Birds were designed to chase these down, and that's just how they.
And now you think about fish. If you're commercially raising fish or whatever, you're raising your fish for your own freezer in big IBC totes or pools or whatever. There's people that do that.
Right.
You're feeding them a more natural diet rather than this fish food that you're buying in a 50-pound bag down at the feed store. I mean, I bet it's better. I mean, it's more natural. It has to be better, right?
When I was looking at the nutrition profiles on those, I mean, it was
Yeah,
just crazy.
So we didn't get into a lot of that because we would have went down some rabbit trails, but the links are in the show notes and we put some links in there. So go check out those links and see kind of the nutrition profiles on some of these things. Watch the videos. I think they're great. I think that some of these blog posts are really informing about what, kind of how to set up, how to do it. Like I said, there's only so much you can really get into the details of that on a podcast. And some of this is just visual stuff. You really need to see how it's done. And it's a great idea. I think you'll have healthier livestock. I think you'll be more self-sufficient. I think it's a great thing to get into. And maybe you're grossed out by bugs. It's funny how some people will talk like they're so grossed out by bugs, but then they'll go down and buy that bag of mealworms and toss them to their chickens, not think anything of it because they don't think of it as a living insect. I mean, it's this dead mealworm, but they're dehydrated and it's like they don't even think that it was once a worm, or a larva of a beetle rather. It's really not that gross when you consider it. It's not that bad. It can get gross depending on how you set things up. It's like I said, why I never went down the whole black soldier fly larva route because that looked pretty nasty to me and I didn't want to mess with that.
Right.
But
if anybody's doing this, get a hold of us. We'd love to talk to you about it. It's really
I'm gonna dabble into a few of these for sure on a little bit more. I'm definitely home more now. I have a little more time. I could definitely do the mealworm thing again. The silkworm really appealed to me because I have an abundance of mulberry leaves, and I thought again, closed loop. You can close loop this thing real easy. So I'm thinking maybe that would be a cool thing to get into. Not for the silk, but for the feed, crickets could be interesting. Grasshoppers interesting. I mean, I'm definitely, and now that I see a better way to do black soldier fly larvae, I think, I'm wondering if I don't notice an abundance of them flying around. I don't know if I would get them naturally or not. Like I said, it seems like it's more of a further south thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think they're here, but I don't think they're here in abundance.
Well, maybe that's something you could do like in a pole barn.
Yeah. Exactly. Set them up out here and get them going. Anyway, I think it's a very realistic thing that we should be looking at as homesteaders.
I mean, I think we're going to have to start looking at some alternative things. We can't just continue to rely on the feed system. We've seen that this year.
Yeah,
with the cost, the unavailability. And where's it coming from? I mean, there's transportation. Right. The getting. Well, and then there's the GMO, and there's the spray.
Yeah,
it's just. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think we're going to have to start thinking of some other options.
And maybe some of these things are definitely out of the box a little bit, but you know what? They're realistic for a lot of people around the world, and it can be a reality on your homestead as well. So, well, if you don't have anything else to add, Rachel, I think we can wrap this up.
That's it.
All right. Well, folks, we really appreciate you joining us today. And until next time, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.
Looking around, I finally see I think I need a change. The rat race, I wanna flee, my world I'll rearrange. I'm getting back to the roots of how it's meant to be. Growing gardens, picking fruit, racing livestock, living free. It's a modern homestead. Build a modern homestead. A lot of folks don't understand why I wanna live this way. They've never eaten from their land like we do here every day. Snapping beans like Grandma did, sitting on her front porch. Hunting and fishing like a kid once you've done all of your chores. city, there's a way to make this change. You gotta start today.